Hi, I'm the next person up. I will moderate myself to the best of my ability. I'll try. And my presentation is, I'm Katie McDaniel, and my presentation is Revelio, Plotting the Unplottable in the Wizarding World's Imaginative Geographies. This project began with this map, Atlas of Wizarding Britain, from the Harry Potter lexicon. This map is a puzzle presenting itself as ordinary. On the one hand, it looks like just a normal map of the British Isles with some real-world locations like London and Ballycastle, and with a rather standard, unadorned legend explaining the symbols, indicating a variety of place types. On the other hand, how can we understand the third symbol down in the legend, which refers to places that are unplottable? Though this symbol is used only once, it is indeed plotted on the map to show the Isle of Dreer, where the murderous quintupeds live, just there in the North Sea. Exactly there, plotted, unplottable, yet plotted. Moreover, there are places plotted on this map not under the unplottable symbol, which we know from Rowling's writings are unplottable, or at least hidden, like Azkaban and Hogwarts. There is something interesting in not only the method used here to plot the unplottable, but also in the very idea of making a map of Wizarding World spaces that are otherwise hidden to Muggle eyes. To understand the imaginative geographies fans are plotting on and through their maps, it's important to review how Rowling herself portrayed space in her magical realm, because the two are strongly connected. Harry Potter's initiation into the peculiarities of Wizarding World spaces occurs early in Book 1 of his adventure when he visits the Leaky Cauldron. It was a grubby-looking pub. If Hagrid hadn't pointed it out, Harry wouldn't have noticed it was there. The people hurrying by it didn't glance at it. Their eyes slid from the big bookshop on the one side to the record shop on the other, as if they couldn't see the Leaky Cauldron at all. In fact, Harry had the most peculiar feeling that only he and Hagrid could see it. The Leaky Cauldron, of course, proves to be an access point to the magical section of London called Diagon Alley, also made up of other cleverly named streets, along with other magical spaces like Platform 9 3/4, the Ministry of Magic, St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, and Number 12 Grimmauld Place. The Leaky Cauldron appears to be charmed so that Muggles either cannot see it or think of it as beneath notice because of its poor condition. These places may be easily hidden in plain sight, partly because Muggles simply don't pay attention to magical spaces. This Muggle blindness to the magic in their, or our, everyday lives prompted wizard scholar Mordecai Egg's book, The Philosophy of the Mundane: Why the Muggles Prefer Not to Know. Stan Shunpike says dismissively of Muggles, I'm not going to try my Cockney accent, I'm just going to read it like an American. Them don't listen properly, do they? Don't look properly either. Never notice nothing, they don't. And yet these places exist in the Muggle world, in our London. If only we could see them, if only they could be revealed to us, if only we could reveal them to others, then we could perhaps find entry into these magical spaces outside but alongside our mundane reality. But many of these places cannot be found because they are either magically hidden, like Hogwarts, or unplottable, a concept suggesting they resist being mapped and therefore known. Unplottable places include the Room of Requirement, the Chamber of Secrets, Number 12 Grimmauld Place, other wizard schools like Durmstrang and Beauxbaton, Azkaban Prison, the Isle of Dreer, and Quidditch Marsh, original home of Quidditch. The Harry Potter books, unlike a lot of other fantasy series like the Oz, Narnia, and Middle-earth books, have not typically featured maps in their front matter, and this likely has something to do with Rowling's choice to cram wizard spaces into real-world geography instead of transporting her protagonist to a different realm entirely. The unplottable nature of so many of these spaces becomes a handy device for explaining how they can remain separate from ordinary Muggle spaces, while unplottability poses a quandary for anyone who might wish to map the Wizarding World. Yet the location of the magical amid the mundane is a tantalizing proposition, and so much of Rowling's story seems to suggest that we could see it if we just knew how. In a way, the story itself propels readers to want to know where to find the unplottable spaces Rowling lets us explore through our imaginations. As our creator of the Atlas of Wizarding Britain shows, the unplottability of magical spaces is not stopping anyone from trying. There has been a fair amount of scholarship on the strange behavior of wizard space in Rowling's fantasy novels. Some have explored it in relation to modern physics in seeing wizarding travel operating through wormholes in the fabric of our space-time continuum. Others have used Michel Foucault's concept of heterotopia, sacred and dangerous space which serves as a mirror that inverts yet reveals our reality, and which, though permeable, is also protected, only penetrable by those with specific identities or passwords, or who have performed special rituals. One thinks of open sesame in Parseltongue. The boarding school was one such heterotopia for Foucault, and so Hogwarts can be read in just such a manner, with its magical characteristics adding an additional element of crisis and danger. Sarah K. Cantrell and Eva Opperman have each explored how the particular places of Rowling's wizarding world can be read as heterotopias, and even how her imaginative realm as a whole and the books themselves serve those functions for readers. Another way of thinking of wizard space amid the mundane spaces of Muggle Britain is to conceive of them as hierophanies. This term refers to 20th century philosopher Mircea Eliade's notion that in our profane existence, there are, quote, manifestations of sacred realities in which, as the term hierophany indicates, quote, something sacred shows itself to us, end quote. The sacred he defines as, quote, a reality of a wholly different order from natural realities, end quote, yet which can be represented by profane or natural objects. Stressing that the sacred refers to a power, Eliade explains, it's a long quote, so I thought I'd put it up here. By manifesting the sacred, any object becomes something else, yet it continues to remain itself, for it continues to participate in its surrounding cosmic milieu. A sacred stone remains a stone. Apparently, or more precisely from the profane point of view, nothing distinguishes it from all other stones. But for those to whom a stone reveals itself as sacred, its immediate reality is transmuted into a supernatural reality. In other words, for those who have a religious experience, all nature is capable of revealing itself as a cosmic sacrality. The cosmos in its entirety can become a hierophany. Some Potter scholars, too, have employed this term to interpret how magical spaces in Rowling's books allow for a manifestation of the sacred in the profane world. For example, Tilia Klevenov-Jacobs, in her essay, The Magic and the Profane, fully explores the effect of hierophany in the semi-sacred magical realm Rowling has created. Likewise, Ken Jacobson explains that for Eliade, quote, hierophany reveals a fixed point or center, often a kind of cosmic pillar or sacred temple touching both earth and sky. A fixed point which can be equated to Hogwarts Castle with its location on a mountain peak, its great hall ceiling bewitched to appear like the sky. It's kind of temple-like. For Eliade, as for Foucault, this sacred realm is not completely inaccessible to those of us in the profane world and can be penetrated by way of thresholds. We can think of a variety of magical travel devices like port keys, the night bus, Floo powder, as well as other magical manifestations like Patronuses, as helping people to cross thresholds into the world of the magical, powerful, dangerous other, the sacred. Where is my threshold? Where's my port key into the magical, powerful, dangerous, and sacred? Unlike Muggles in Rowling's fictional world, we Muggle readers of Harry Potter have some knowledge of such spaces, apart yet alongside ours, except for those who prefer not to know. And yet we don't have those points of access available to us that we know of, as they were to Hermione's parents, for example. And here's where I think fan mapping comes into play. When fans plot the unplottable places of Harry Potter's world, they are creating a kind of all-muggle threshold through which to penetrate the realm of the sacred, those spaces in the wizarding world filled with mystery and danger, and the appeal of the powerful radical other that we wish we could experience ourselves. The concepts of space that scholars have applied to Rowling's writing, which are not in contradiction but rather tend to reinforce each other, may also be applied to fan practices, particularly the practice of finding thresholds through which to permeate the separate, sacred, powerful other spaces which reveal our own reality to us. When fans make maps for the Harry Potter series, they almost always focus on unplottable or at least hidden magical places. There are some exceptions, like Little Whinging. People like to show you where Little Whinging is, the definition of not magical, but there it is. Maps of Hogwarts are the most plentiful, as you might guess, given its center point as a hierophany for both characters and readers, but also Diagon Alley, Hogsmeade, Godric's Hollow, the location of the Quidditch World Cup finals from Book 4. Harry Potter readers have also sought to visually represent the interiors of magical buildings whose space is subject to change, as heterotopias often are, and which contain spatial mysteries. St. Mungo's Hospital, the Ministry of Magic, the Burrow, and once again, of course, Hogwarts. And I'm going to show you examples of all of these. Even within these magical locations, there exist even more mysterious spaces like the Department of Mysteries and the Chamber of Secrets. Interestingly, there are not many attempts at mapping the distinctly confounding and unplottable Room of Requirement on its own, in isolation from the rest of Hogwarts. Perhaps it is too changeable. Perhaps its many simultaneous existences defy visual representation. In the fashion of Schrodinger's cat, the room with the chamber pots, the DA practice room, and the place where everything is hidden, among all the other realities of the Room of Requirement, can only exist at the same time if we don't look into the room, but instead hold all its possibilities in abstraction in our minds. Many of the images I'm going to show you have been collected by Steve Vander Ark on his website, The Harry Potter Lexicon, which contains a whole section called Atlas of the Wizarding World. Fan maps range in artistic quality, which you will see, imagination, and level of detail. Some are digital, others are handcrafted on paper. Obviously, the Atlas of Wizarding Britain map, with which I began, is not especially aesthetically compelling, but it remains philosophically and culturally interesting nonetheless because of its determination to plot the unplottable, immersing the spaces of magical Britain in a sea of quite ordinary, mundane mapping information. Fans often appear to begin with an already plotted map of the real world, recognizable to our modern sensibilities, into which they, in quite Rowling-esque fashion, wedge magical places. These maps approach space geometrically and use typeface for writing, bringing magical space under the purview of modern cartographic aesthetics that emphasize transparency, clarity, and precision. I'm going to show you a couple of these. Here's Hogsmeade, right? That looks like that could just be a regular map. And there's Godric's Hollow, for example. The appeal of this modern style of map making is in making the magical accessible by visually rendering it in a mundane fashion. Getting to these spaces seems possible, and these places seem more ordinary as a result, even though we know they are places where magic lives. This map of the Wizarding World underground, which I just find totally fascinating, suggests that you could find these magical places and stops on a subway, including the Burrow, the Quidditch World Cup site, and even Azkaban, just a short hop on, it's not the Piccadilly line, but right, so you just go up to Azkaban if you feel like it. Fans are also quite creatively using a variety of their own artistic and visual strategies to bring viewers into closer proximity to the sacred, power-filled places of the Wizarding world. They often replicate the hand-drawn quality of older maps. They sometimes mimic the lettering used in the Harry Potter books and movies. This one is a good example of one that's kind of in between modern cartography and what you would see in the more hand-drawn maps. They often use old-fashioned cursive lettering or calligraphy to evoke an earlier era and places where time has stood still or lagged behind in some respects. So that's Hogwarts. There's Hogsmeade. It looks, you know, it looks kind of yellowish, right? There's Diagon Alley. When fans map interiors, they draw on a range of techniques to help viewers feel they can navigate these spaces that often twist about and change without warning, like the stairs and classrooms of Hogwarts Castle. Slicing into the building to show its insides allows for viewers to enter the building and see where rooms are in relation to each other. So there's Hogwarts. There are a couple of the Burrow. Actually, that's a very common one for our fans to do. The Ministry of Magic maps tend to dwell on floor plans of different departments. The Department of Mysteries is the most compelling and challenging, I think. Right, where does everything go in the Department of Mysteries, including the locked room, and is it small or is it large? But I'd like to focus now on one particular fan artist who's made several maps relating to hierophantic spaces from Rowling's Wizarding World. Kiko Sanchez, aka Kiko Ilustrador, he's from Spain, has made maps of the Ministry of Magic, St. Mungo's, Hogsmeade, Diagon Alley, the Quidditch World Cup Stadium, which I did not purchase that one, the Chamber of Secrets, and he's got Fantastic Beasts realms, he's got MACUSA, and the French Ministry of Magic, and he sells these on Etsy, and that's where I bought them. The digital imaging replicates watercolor painting and is printed on textured paper, quote, aged by hand, to evoke a fine art and antique feel. His lettering recalls Wizarding World typeface and handwriting, and the representation of the spaces and buildings are a blend of the freehand and more geometric representations of other maps. I'm going to show you more detail on these. In the corner of the maps of Diagon Alley and St. Mungo's lies a grid map. Oh, sorry, that was the Chamber of Secrets one. We'll see that in more detail later on, but that's pretty cool, Chamber of Secrets. So these are the grid maps that lie in the corners of two of the maps, and they are trying to situate these territories, Diagon Alley and St. Mungo's, in real-world London. And you can see that they're situated in between streets like Charing Cross Road and Shaftesbury Avenue. Sanchez's maps are quite architectural, emphasizing the structures of buildings, their levels, their corridors and common areas, their hidden properties. Let's look at the Ministry of Magic map. It descends in a twisty column from top to bottom, with lighter red-brown hue on top, changing to a darker blue for the lower levels of the Department of Mysteries, the Hall of Prophecy, the Wizengamot courtrooms, and the Chamber of Death. This visualization highlights both the generally confusing layout of the building and the greater simplicity, darkness, and enigmatic qualities of the lower levels when compared to the bustling complexity of the upper floors. Sanchez's plan for St. Mungo's looks like the map you might see on the inside wall upon entering the hospital. One side of the building shows the exterior, while the other removes the exterior wall so we can glimpse the rooms inside. A note on the edge reads, quote, "If you are unsure where to go, incapable of normal speech, or unable to remember why you are here, our welcome witch will be pleased to help." A quote drawn from Rowling herself, of course. There are also instructions on both the St. Mungo's and Ministry maps explaining what to do in case of fire in the building, written in bureaucratic language and including an exhortation to, quote, "close all doors and any open flue powder entrances." On his map of two wizarding shopping districts, Diagon Alley and Hogsmeade, a written warning cautions that, quote, "shop locations," this is very small up there, right there, "shop locations may vary depending on moon phases." This gives us the impression of spatial fluidity that a static map would otherwise tend to erase. The mingling of the strange with the ordinary in these maps creates the effect of the sacred manifesting in the world of the profane. In the Wizarding World, and for viewers of these maps, the two kinds of space are entwined in ways that appeal to our desire to experience such spaces, but not to become untethered from our own world. Further adding to the impression of the sacred conveyed by these maps are their overhead perspectives, just as a reminder. This visually references very common kind of cathedral view, cathedral overheads. Very common way to represent cathedrals. And these images also tend to be drawing on what are called nave elevations. They're a very common way of depicting the interiors of churches. Referencing religious space in Wizarding World maps suggests implicitly the sacred, imposed on the magical world and our world, showing their intersections as well as their points of permeability or thresholds. Curiously, however, Sanchez's buildings, at the same time they are suggestive of accessibility, do not actually provide access for us muggles. Doors are closed or unmarked, though the Floo powder grate is marked in the Ministry of Magic. If anybody has Floo powder, we're set. There are white spaces in the city grids so that we cannot actually get from Charing Cross Road to the Leaky Cauldron and thence to Diagon Alley. Can you see the little white spaces? You can't get there from here. Hogsmeade has no street grid in the corner, and so we neither board the Hogwarts Express nor enter the town. We remain lingering overhead, seeing but not being there. Sanchez's presentation of the Chamber of Secrets, which appears to provide wormhole-like conduits for penetrating the chamber, also contradictorily reinforces its impenetrability. So I've just given you some details here. You've got the tiny profane locale of the girls' lavatory, which is our entry point into the Chamber of Secrets. Through a series of pipes labeled Lost Tunnel and Corridor of Secrets, we see the extraordinary and serpent-filled space of the chamber, but it remains remote and mysterious to us because of these several layers of secrecy and loss. I'll let somebody else do a Freudian reading of that. Ultimately, this is the central question. Do such renderings of magical space bring them nearer to us and allow us to experience them as if we were there? Do they make us part of the magic? Or do they instead reinforce our distance from the spaces Harry Potter fans view as sacred and cast us repeatedly back into the inverse profane world? On the positive side, the shared nature of these illustrations, the way they welcome all seekers to come to Godric's Hollow or Hogsmeade or any of these magical locales, suggests an encouraging possibility. Lily Wilkinson sees fan fiction as fans attempt, quote, to not only extend the diegetic or narrative heterotopia, but also to invite others to experience it with them. Communities of fans lay the diegetic heterotopia over the real world and create a new heterotopia in the space in between where teenage, and I would say also adult, fans can experience the kind of empowerment, agency, and transformation they have vicariously participated in within the novels they love, end quote. These maps are a visual laying over of the magical world onto our own ordinary one. This is a clear extension of Rowling's own themes about the nature of magical and mundane space and the importance of truly seeing the sacred hidden in our daily lives. Both Jacobs and Jacobson's works on the hierophanies in the Harry Potter novels similarly suggest the rich mythic background of Rowling's Wizarding World contributes to the view of the magic realm as sacred. Myth describes, in Eliade's words, quote, the various and sometimes dramatic eruptions of the sacred into the world, which then establishes the world as a reality, end quote. When fans engage and deepen that mythos through their maps of sacred spaces, they are extending the world of power and the extraordinary into their own lives and the lives of those with whom they share their work. The map itself becomes the threshold, the sacred object through which everyday people can experience an alternative, transformative reality. Fan maps translate sacred space into sacred object. There remains something missing in this connection, though, and maybe that's for the best. Sacred spaces are not necessarily meant to be easy to get to. Perhaps if these maps were fully successful in revealing eruptions of the sacred within the profane, they would drain such places of their magic, demythologizing them and providing rationalization where faith is required to truly see. Thank you.